Hello, everybody. Good morning. And we're looking forward to an exciting 1.5 hours with you. As we stand, we are nearly under 400. We're at 375-ish. So welcome to each one of you. And fundraising is such an exciting yet intimidating topic. And within that, we have both the regulatory and the ethical considerations to think about. And as the topic of this overall conference is governance for leadership. And we wanted to really help you think through together, as well as share some tips and pointers related to how we can ensure the sustainability of the organization, being exceptional in our fundraising, while maintaining the understanding and implementing the regulatory requirements and knowing how to weigh out the dilemmas that we may have related to some of the ethical issues. So we've got a brilliant and solid panel coming up soon. But before we start into the actual conversation, because this is a workshop, yeah? So it's not a lecture. We will have things to share, but a lot of it is really how you make it in the next 90 minutes. So I want to start with us getting to know each other. Of course, with about, oh wow, it's nearly 400 now. I'm not going to ask you for your names and addresses, but what I'm going to ask you is, Pauline, will you do us the honors to launch your first poll so we can get to know what is the role you play in the charity that you're representing here in this room today. Let's get to know you, at least related to your role in the charity you represent here today. Okay, we have about 419 in the room at this point in time, and this is how we, a quarter of us belong to the board, or rather chair of the board. Well done, valiant leaders, for taking on that responsibility. A whole bunch of us, 72, that is 20, another 20%, oh no, 7% board members, 21%, a 7% chair, 21% board members. A few of you, 2%, 8 of you in the room are subcommittee members. 51 of you are CEOs or EDs of charities. That's about 15% of us here in this room. A lot of you are 100 over is management staff. That's 31% of us. 17 or 5% is fundraising staff, and a few volunteers and a few others. Others, I'm imagining they don't actually, you're members of some corporate groups that are here to learn more about the sector. Okay, brilliant. Welcome to one and all, to the 24 chairs of the board. Yay, good job. To the 72 volunteers who are on as board members and the 8 others as subcommittee members. Well done to you. CEOs and EDs, later you will meet one of your kind, that is Samuel from All Saints. Thanks for being the valiant leaders that you are for the sector. And then the management staff, 100 over of you. Thanks for coming and joining us, because it's all about building the capabilities and the leadership going forward. The fundraisers, the face that gets slapped sometimes, or, you know, welcomed with open arms, because we're great at our storytelling and our narratives and our passion for the work we do. 17 of you who are fundraising staff, welcome. And the rest of you, and to all my panelists who I will soon introduce, welcome to all of you. Let's go to the second poll. And the second poll is more technical, related to the topic, ethics and regulations. So I've given you a few options of ethical and regulatory items to think about. And we'll give you a little more time with this one. You need to think very carefully, what are the 3 top challenges related to fundraising that you face with some of these options given to you? And if you choose to click others, I really hope in the chat function, you will highlight what that others is that we haven't covered yet, yeah? So that during question and answers, we can try and share with you some of the experiences of the panel. Choose 3. All right. We are sharing the results now. So a majority of you said donor communications and stewardship. That's 74% of you said that. Followed by PDPA and compensation. Later on, we will talk about, how some of these dilemmas or challenges either has a regulatory implication or is an ethical discussion that the board and the leadership needs to have. And my panelists who are behind the curtains at this point in time are kind of looking through all your comments, and we hope we will be able to share. And also in the question and answer or chat function, please highlight your inputs too, because this is called a workshop, right? Not just a one-way street. So we will learn together, and what better, we are at 4:39, woohoo! So, for over 400 of us can collectively create a good body of knowledge related to this topic today. And I really hope that's the outcome of today, and we can get on, with understanding it better. Transparency, telling the whole truth, unrestricted funds, yes, the ring fencing, again, it's connected to the stewardship part, making sure that donor intent is met, and it has a compliance impact also. A few of you said others. I'm going to look at the chat or the question function. So Grace, you said you have sent us one other question in the question. So we will try and address all of that. Okay. All right. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes if you want to reflect on this and put down some chat points. I'm trying to look at some of your questions that are coming up. Okay, thank you so much. Next, I would like for our next question to go out. And take a look and remember these outputs so that later when we discuss, you can reflect back on some of that. Now, this is a quick and easy one. As per Singapore charity regulations, what is the total allowable percentage that can be spent on fundraising in a financial year compared with the charity's total receipt from fundraising and sponsorship for that financial year? How much do you think we're allowed to spend as per the regulation? I know we have had another 100 people join us. We're in the midst of a poll for those of you who've just about 60 more that have joined us in the last few minutes. Welcome. We are on a third poll right now, trying to understand what you understand about some of the regulations before we start talking about regulations and ethics. All right, so there you go. Ooh, 75% of you got it right. That's 255 of you that voted. Well done. Some of you did get, I won't ask you who is it who got it wrong, but you know now. The other 25% of you know that you are allowed 30% of what, and actually Singapore, I work across the globe, and one of the most, in terms of fundraising environment, one of the most supportive environment, regulatory as well as, regulations are needed, but it's very thought through and very done with an understanding of the needs of our charities. And at 30%, you know, in other countries I have to fight for my clients, because at 10% and so on and so forth, you know, some of it's even 3%. So some of you have said 3 and 10, but unfortunately for Singapore, 30% is allowed as investment in fundraising so that we can raise the funds that we need to. Having said that, one of the reasons, and later we will talk about the formula and rules and regulations, especially with commercial fundraising, which is important. But I have found that investments made in fundraising, I totally, you know, while you've answered, 75% of you have answered that, you know the answer, it's 30%. I kind of challenge you to go and really look at your books and see what kind of investments you're doing. And some of the studies that we've done, and as well as my personal experience, we don't even pass 5%. It's good that we need to be frugal. I'm not saying that we need to spend the entire 30%, but it's very important as leaders, and especially when you talk about sustainability. You know, gone are the days when you can do one gala and hopefully, you know, wish that all your fundraising needs are being met that way, or one, you know, special event. Without some of the investments required for fundraising, how do you expect your organization as management leaders as well as board leaders? Without investment, how do you expect the organization? And additionally, we have all the other, like the tote board matching fund for fundraising. We have VCFs, all of that. How are we making sure we're doing a good job of really thinking through, if we are thinking of fundraising as a strategic imperative, ensuring that the investments needed for that, volunteer as well as, you know, in the case of actual financials, what is the investment that we are making in our organizations is a good question to ask. But well done to all of you who have answered it right, and the rest of you, you've learned something new today. One last question. Can we please have the fourth question, please? All right, can we take a look at the poll results, please, for the fourth poll? Aha, now this one. Especially now, the new normal where online fundraising will have to become sort of more the norm or mainstream. 17% of you got it right at number 4. So far, Singapore has 4 portals, you know, crowdfunding for platforms that are signed to the Code of Best Practice. Those who said only 1, that's wrong. 2 is wrong. 3 is wrong. 5 is wrong. None is wrong. Too many is wrong. In this, there is an actual answer. And the answer is 4. Is Giving.sg, Give Asia, Ray of Hope, and Simply Giving. These are the 4 platforms that have signed to the Code of Practice with the Commissioner to ensure proper, you know, follow of the best practices of online fundraising. Yeah. So I hope that will kind of help you understand. And as we go along, I hope you have read the Code of Practice for online fundraising, which actually happened before COVID, right? It was, you know, worked upon a couple of years back, and rightly so. Singapore always ahead of the curve, right? We kind of were prepared for it. So now that all of us are jumping online because of the COVID realities, well, we know there is a code, and we know there are certain platforms that are abiding by the code. So the credit check has been done by the powers that be. All right. So thank you so much for your participation as we get to the rest of the hour that we have together. And at this point in time, it's my pleasure and honor to hand the time over to Pauline so that she can properly introduce Robson, who's going to share with us some of the regulatory framework. Robson, can we see you? And Pauline, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Usha. Wow, that's really a lot of results and inputs on all the 4 questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I'd just like to introduce Mr. Robson Lee. Robson is the Assistant Hon Secretary of SIAS and also a Global Equity Partner from Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. So he will be sharing with us a little bit in terms of, the regulatory framework and legislative requirement in terms of fundraising, for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Over to you, Mr. Robson Lee.
Okay, can you all see me?
Yes, if you tilt your camera a bit more, we will see all of you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry, I clicked the wrong button earlier, so the whole screen disappeared and I got worried. Thank you to all participants, and thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Usha. For prefacing and doing the curtain raiser for this morning's workshop. What I want to talk about is not so much as to recite to you the laws and regulations and read you the Riot Act, which actually it's all available on the charity portal, and I think most important is to understand the spirit of all these rules. At the end of the day, the prevailing thoughts and the intention of the regulation is not so much as to be prescriptive, but rather to set out what the government believes are best practices and guidelines, so that when you go about navigating the entire fundraising process, you have in mind the objectives, the raison d'etre of these rules, so that you stay on the right side, not just to comply with the letter of the law, but the spirit. I think I emphasize that. So what are the principles? I think this is where I'm coming from. At the end of the day, whether you are doing a fundraising for a charity or raising funds for a corporate purpose like an initial public offering, you must be accountable. You must be transparent to the people that you're approaching for funds. You must set out clearly the purposes of the fundraising, the objectives. There's transparency, there's due processes, checks and balances to make sure that whatever funds that you raise, you can properly account for it. There's integrity, honesty in the process, and it can withstand scrutiny. I think that's very important. So, you get into situations, the 30-70 rule, what you can spend as expenses, what do you need to devote a large part of the funds that you're raising to the charitable purposes that you have set out in your appeal, whether is it online or whether is it the typical way of raising funds previously, whether it's with COVID-19 or pre-COVID-19 or post-COVID-19. I think at the end of the day, there must be integrity in the process. So of course, what does it mean? You need to have people who are there with the right motives, the right attitude, and of course, that high degree of professionalism to make sure that whatever that you have raised the funds, you have proper accounts, you have proper financial statements, you have it audited, and if they exceed 1 million, then of course you need to keep separate accounts so that you can then be able to present to your sector administrator if from time to time people want to review what you have done, or if there's any disquiet, or if there's any issue raised by any person who is concerned, you are able to in a very confident, composed manner says, check my books, I have all these things in place, every cent that I spend, plus minus some really inconsequential or immaterial erroneous posting or whatsoever, largely the funds are properly accounted for. So I think that is the kind of the attitude and the mindset when you go about doing a fundraising, when you set up your charity, or when you want to basically put up a system and have it institutionalized. So whoever who is in the management committee, these ethics or this kind of ethos is passed down. Now, of course, in the 21st century, now that we have online, increasingly there are issues concerning money laundering. I never cease to marvel at the way people try to manipulate or try to hijack charitable intentions and emotions of people, and you know, they go on a mass appeal on something that is fictional, fraudulent even, and then at the end of the day the money goes diverted elsewhere. So this is where I think you have to be aware that Singapore has very strict laws against terrorist funding, drugs, and other illicit kind of activities, which are then whitewashed in a form of charitable fundraising appeals and tugging at the heartstrings of sorts. And so of course, as a donor, of course, you have to be careful, but more importantly, as a charity organization, you have to be careful if someone approaches you and says, let's do this pairing together, let's do this together, you know, and we can, you know, combine and work with you and come up with something that is mutually beneficial to both institutions. I think you have to, at the end of the day, be able to understand how you are going to account for it if something goes wrong, and it's better to be careful, it's better to be diligent, thorough, and you must understand how these things work, because you know, in the last 20 or 30 years of you know, of charity donation drive in Singapore, we have seen increasingly very creative commercial enterprises who come and say that, let me do this for you, you contract with me, let me do something that is you know, impressive, it's very graphic, very creative, you know. So you have to know, firstly, you got to be able to account for the expenses that you spend on it, 30-70 rule. Second, again, all monies must go straight to the charity, and then you must have a proper contract where then you pay the agent who is helping you to put all these things in place to facilitate fundraising. So in other words, you are at the helm of things. You do not lose control. Neither do you allow such commercial entities to hijack the entire process and you don't know what's happening, because the buck stops at your door. You are fully accountable because the donation drive is made in your institution's name. Everything is you know, positioned and profile to be pursuant to you know, the charitable objectives or the you know, the fundraising purposes that is set out to be. So you know, in a nutshell, this is what I want to talk about, and it equally applies to online charity portals or fundraising portals, whether you have 4 or 10 or 20. The principles apply, and the spirit of it must be complied, you know, in the fullest sense of the word. And particularly, you know, there is a formula for the 30-70 rule, I think, set out in the regulations for local and foreign fundraising, I think 2012. You can check it out. I mean, the MCCY and the Commission of Charities, they have a very detailed portal. So 21st century, you don't need to go very often to lawyers or go to the law library to check. You can just with a smartphone, you can click on and, you know, everything is there. But I think it's in the interpretation, it's in the institutionalization that you need people with legal and accounting and financing background to help you put in place, you know, that something that can withstand scrutiny and can constantly be improved, because people are getting more and more creative. Of course, you have to be aware of PDPA, because very often when you have all these commercial entities who come and help you, you know, do fundraising, they might be doing data mining. So your contract with them has to be very careful that you don't allow the personal information which is confidential, which is sensitive of your donors, to then be hijacked and later used for other commercial purposes, because then you'll be in breach of your PDPA obligations, and that's quite serious. In fact, many even government or government-linked institutions have had breaches of the confidential information of their stakeholders. So I think you have to be very careful. Technology has made things easier. It has also made it difficult to monitor and to protect and enshrine in case there are people who hacks in, there are people who misuse it, there are people who manipulate it and hijack it before you can even blink your eye. So so it's not so simple, because at the end of the day, you have to remember, when you raise funds from the public, you have a very high duty of care. You have a very high duty of responsibility, and if it's not done properly, you open up yourselves to civil lawsuits, or worse still, criminal prosecutions. Because if you are negligent, there are different degrees of neglect which would make you responsible. And we have had examples in the past, big cases that basically, and sometimes when you are in the hot soup, or when you are, on squad box to explain why you did it or why you didn't do it, you cannot say, look, I'm just doing it as a pro bono. I'm not even receiving taking any salary, or I'm not a fat cat CEO. That's irrelevant, because at the end of the day, the duty is reposed on you by virtue of the position you hold. And I've seen previously a case where distinguished men and women, when there was an oversight that led to a cause of action, some have even been made bankrupt. Some have actually been extradited from another jurisdiction to face the music, and I think they face jail terms, or they face personal bankruptcy, and that's hardship. That's the unfortunate thing if you're not careful. So today, I think I see a number of CEOs, members of the management committee, and in Singapore, it has earned a reputation for being clean, top in governance and all that. So you can imagine the laws can be very harsh when there are lapses that has caused tremendous disquiet or issues of outcry, blue murder, whatever you call it. So with that, I'm gonna, I think I've used up my 10 minutes. I try not to read the law. I try to share with you in a more, conversational style, which is more something which I hope will be useful, but I'll be ready to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Robson Lee. It's really very insightful, by sharing actually the substance more than the form. So without further ado, we have the next good almost an hour. Let's invite Ms. Peggy E, members, Charity Council, and also Mr. Samuel Tan, CEO from All Saints Home, to be on the panel, and our moderator today, of course, Ms. Usha Menon, to take the Q&A and the panel discussion. Over to you, Usha.
Thank you, Pauline, and that was a good start. Thank you so much, Robson, for setting the tone of this conversation that we're going to have. And there are quite a lot of questions that have come up. There you are.
Hello, everyone.
There she is. Welcome again.
Not taking it personally.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to just ask both. So Robson has kind of laid out the regulatory side of things. Peggy, can I ask you to share your top thoughts on the ethics part, especially, and as member of the Charity Council, and your role as a pro bono volunteer, with the various charities, some of your experiences, your journey. And later, of course, Samuel, I'll ask you from the ground up, the actual guy who needs to implement these regulations, or the guy who needs to sit and figure out with his board and his staff the dilemmas that you may have. So first, Peggy, will you start us off with your top thoughts on it? And we have questions coming in. I'll make sure we get answers to that too. But listen in everybody, because in the top thoughts are some of your answers already. But over to you, Peggy.
Thank you, Usha. And I hope to be able to shed some light. The charities unit, which is formed, we assist. It is an office formed to assist the Commissioner of Charities, who oversees all the charities in Singapore. And Robson has brought you through some of the legislative framework, including the 2 codes that are available. It's on the charities portal. There is a code of practice for charitable online fundraising, and there's also a code for commercial fundraisers. Now, these codes are actually is a good summary of the what to do's, what you must do, and what are the should do's. So the backbone to these 2 codes would be the law on it, the legislation, and that would chiefly be the Charities Act and the regulations made under that. So as Robson correctly put it, because this is a workshop, he does not, he has said that we will not read you the law. The law is there, but come and ask us the questions. So, but if you look at the codes that are already helpfully provided on the charities portal, you'll see that it is a good synthesis of all the must-dos and the should-dos. And then overarching all that, because that is what the law says you must do, and COC charities, the commissioner then helpfully tells us, in order to help us navigate this whole landscape, then shows us what are the best practices that should be adopted over and above what the law mandates must be done. So I invite us today, because the 400 over of us here, all of whom are in this sector, and the majority of which are in the management part of the charity, I invite us, even as we know that these are that there are legal and regulatory provisions that must be complied with, how do we at the same time, in this very challenging time of fundraising, because I pause here to note that I do empathize and I am aware, I'm very keenly aware, being involved in charities myself, how difficult it is at this time, especially because everything has to be stopped and you have to move your entire operations online, which means that the fundraising that was continuously done has actually taken a completely different complexion altogether. So no longer do you have no longer can you continue to have your donor engagement, where your donors come and then they want to have perhaps a photo opportunity. You cannot have that anymore, and everything is moved online. So how then does a charity deal and cope with this? Because in the rush to ensure that you keep the funds coming, that you keep your donations coming, what do? Because you need, what are the competing challenges that you have? One, you need to ensure that the funds continue. But most importantly, you need to ensure that you stay on the right track, and that you stay above board, that everything is done legitimately. And then on top of that, for the purposes of today, I would like to invite you to also look at another aspect, at the ethical part of it, because ethics and the law comes together. But as far as ethics is concerned, first let's ask ourselves, what is ethics? What does the word even mean? The dictionaries tell us that ethics is actually a discipline of knowing what is right and what is wrong. But if only it was as easy as a road sign that will tell you this is right and this is wrong. Unfortunately, there is no such thing, because ethics deals with the discipline, and it has to be a discipline that is in you, depending on your organization, to know when to do what is the right thing. And with ethics as well, not only do you decide, for example, if your charity if your charity is one which takes care of at-risk youth, do you then accept monies or funding from a company that whose main business is a tobacco company, or one that sells alcohol? Do you or do you not? Do I have the answer to that? Unfortunately, and I'll be honest, I'll say no, but I'd like to hear from you. But this is exactly what it is. Ethics has to be part of your corporate conversation. But a conversation is just that. It is talk. We do not want it just to be a conversation. That conversation must translate into an action plan, which is then incorporated into your organizational culture, and then must be implemented. You've heard charities yesterday speak about leadership, and it is this leadership which refers to all of you who are attending today. It is this leadership that is paramount, because if from leadership, this culture of being ethical is not started and is not imbued into the organization, it will not take root. And if it does not take root, it does not become part of your corporational organization. And that is what the charities unit would like to invite all of you to consider and to think and to build that into your organization. So, because I'm back, I was actually taking a detour, sorry Usha. So I'll go back to the two quotes that govern, that provide the framework and also inform you about what the best practices are. So when it comes to, and I invite you to go onto the charities portal to look at those two quotes, because that is your very good, call it a roadmap, if you will, because it incorporates, remember, the must-dos and the should-dos. So I move on to the issue of the dignity as in relation to the issue of ethics. When we talk about the dignity of a person in respect of fundraising, it is very easy to straight away think of the person who's receiving assistance, receiving aid, right? So all of us here in this charity sector, we are here because we want to do good and we want to help. And the parties that we help, it can be an organization, because as you know, charities cut across sectors. Is it for the advancement of, for the relief of poverty, advancement of education, or for the other community needs, like the arts, sports, etc., you know, even animal welfare. So we all want to do good. But when we talk about the dignity of the person, I give you an example. Let's say I will use, for example, Caritas. Caritas is one of the charities in Singapore that reaches out to the poor and the vulnerable in Singapore across all religions. Doesn't matter. That is what Caritas does. And what it has done in this climate, in this challenging climate of fundraising, and with a very firm, fixed view to ensure that the dignity of the beneficiary is protected. I will give you an example by sharing screen. If you see this screen, you will see this is taken off the social media. So here's a situation where, and it is actually accompanied by a picture which did not come into this text. So here is where Mount Alvernia Outreach were able to provide a particular Uncle J who was actually toothless. He had no teeth. But instead of the usual route, which is the most, in Robson's words, the most, you know, what some charities do is to pull at the heartstrings, right? Instead of just showing the person Uncle J as it is, what it has done is to say, we love to see you smile, and the emphasis is placed on, we love to see this. So it is not on the person on, oh, Uncle J is so pathetic, poor thing, he has no teeth. But it is to look at it from the other angle and to see how Mount Alvernia Outreach, which is an organization within Caritas, how it has done its work to befriend Uncle J and then provided him with a new set of teeth. And I give you another example. Canossaville Children's and Community Services, which is a a social service organization which caters to disadvantaged children and their families. So in its giving out of rations, all right, because these are families who really do not even have meals. So in its giving out of rations, when it reaches out to its donors to inform them that we are raising funds so that we can do these activities. What it has done is to in protection of its beneficiaries, they actually take care to ensure that the entrance and the exit, where the families enter, they pick up their big bundles and trolley bags of rations, that they exit in another way. Why is that so? Why the extra trouble? It's really to ensure that that these beneficiaries, they may be disadvantaged, they may be poor, but they retain their dignity. All right. Now, one last example, and that example is and I bring in what I know about the Disabled People's Association, which, as the name implies, is a charity that that looks in and works with and for the advocacy of persons with disability, both the visible and invisible disabilities. What it does have, they have persons called inclusion ambassadors as part of its fundraising activities and outreach as well. These inclusion ambassadors are persons with disability, but these persons with disability actually go out front and center to the donors and to mingle with them and to also show that this is what I am, this is my disability, and I'd like you to look at me with my disability. And these disabilities could be autism or could be the physical disabilities. And the donors then know that this is why, and this is why my funds are going to you, and this is what I can consider. So it is about, so whilst we look at dignity, the first two examples that I've given you is protecting the integrity of the person and the dignity of the person. This third example I'm giving you is to bring up the dignity of the person, to empower them, and to show to the wider public as well, and more importantly, the donors, that these persons that you're helping are persons of their own right, and they have abilities. One last example, Assisi Hospice. Assisi Hospice, you will see in their fundraising efforts as well, they will what they do is to highlight the skills of their beneficiaries. That with these skills, they are able to make crafts, they're able to do things, and these are the things that are being sold, part of fundraising. And this is via the online platforms. So I hope that these examples have given you a good flavor of the different ways that you can look at the preservation and protection of the dignity of the beneficiary. But before I leave off, I also invite all of us here, when we look at the dignity of the person, I invite you also to look at the dignity of the donor, because in my view, it is not complete to just say, let's protect the dignity of the beneficiary. You must also be respectful, not just mindful, but be respectful of the dignity of the donor, the ones to whom you are going to reach out, because donors are as intelligent as anyone else, and they have a good heart. So let us, as charities, even as we are reaching out to them and planning and corporatizing our vision and putting it into action, let us not forget that we have to respect the dignity of the donors by ensuring that their concerns are met, which of course then brings us to what Robson was saying. Do not just look at the letter, you must also adopt and bear in mind the spirit of the law. So bear in mind that the donors must be protected, and their protection also extends as a practical example. For example, after you take the funds from the donor, is that it? Is that just bye-bye and that's it? No, the dignity of the donor requires, I would feel, that you also continue to engage them. Let them know what's happening to the parties, to the cause that they've contributed, or to the specific person that they've contributed to.
All right, thank you, Peggy. That was very personal, and your commitment to the sector is coming through while you're talking about the ethics. And just like Robson, while he was talking about the real letters of the law, you could tell you guys have that heart. And anybody in this room today is in this room today because at the end of the day, it's the fundraising is just the means to the end. The end in itself is that transformation of our society, of that individual, ourselves that we are hoping to achieve through the fundraising. So that's one tip I've always shared with any of my clients. Never say, please support us. Please support through us the people that we plan to impact, or together that we can impact, while maintaining the very important dignity, both of us, the fundraisers who are in the front end, our beneficiaries for whom all of this is being done, and the donors who are with whom we are taking them on a journey rather than making it transactional. And Peggy, your stories really shows that, right? Fundraising is not about making a transaction. It's about making a transformation. And hence, if it is not about a transaction, it has to be a relationship. And relationship, the stronger it is, lesser the transactional value. Yeah, it's like your first date. You may buy roses or buy a dinner, but later on, when it becomes a relationship, it's not about the roses or the dinner. It is about the genuine trust and respect that we offer each other. And basically, that's what fundraising is about. Donor, a relationship with the organization that's trying to make the difference. And that brings us nicely to Samuel. Samuel, you're living it, and you chose to kind of move from the corporate sector and actually take a job in the impact sector, social impact sector, as social service agencies, whatever you want to call it. How has your journey been with grappling with the law, the spirit, and the ethics of fundraising? Samuel?
Hi, Usha, thanks. And hello, everyone. Now, first, maybe I'd like to talk about the law and regulations. We heard a lot from Robson.
And there are a few questions that, you could even answer some of them.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually speaking as a CEO, but I'm also a volunteer and donor, right? Personally, I am very grateful that we have got good laws and regulations in Singapore. I see these as empowering, enabling, rather than restrictive. Now, because with the laws and regulations, donors will have a sense of maybe security of the law of the land that is protecting their donations. And for us as practitioners, we also are clear about the framework that we are operating in. So I personally am happy that we have got the laws and regulations to guide us. So like most other CEOs, donation is quite a big topic for me, right? But then with COVID-19, all our plans are now disrupted, right? You can forget about the targets that you have set because COVID has affected all of Singapore and in fact most of the world. And our donors are also suffering, right? So I feel that this period of time when we are soliciting for donations, our posture, we have to adopt a posture of sensitivity, especially for our donors who are now suffering financially. Okay, but what I would like to do during this period is that for our existing donors, we want to continue to keep in touch with them, right? We shouldn't have a very transactional or mercenary kind of relationships whereby we totally forget about them when they are not giving us money. But we make an effort to keep in touch with our donors, to update them what we have been doing, and also to find out from them how they are doing as well. So there's no pressure for them to donate, but of course we keep them updated of our activities. Now, I also feel that while COVID-19 has more or less stopped most of our physical activities, but it does open up good opportunities for us to engage many, many more people online. Okay, can you just imagine in a typical, let's say, fundraising dinner, you may have 40 or 50 tables and maybe 500 people attending. But now through online kind of engagements, you can have thousands of people participating. Right, so I feel that now there is a good opportunity for us to educate people, to also tell people about our cause, what we stand for. And yeah, I'm very happy to learn from Peggy earlier on, because now with this pandemic, it also helps us to refocus on our mission and vision, what we really stand for. Right, so for me personally, even though our absolute donation has dropped, but what I'm pleasantly surprised is that we have actually built up a stronger donation base. We seem to have more donors, although they are giving less, but we have more of donors. We actually have got a bigger pool. Right, I can, even earlier this year, my colleagues from my ex-company, we still keep in touch. So they, on their own, they actually had a fundraising campaign for All Saints Home. During the period when we had this circuit breaker, and our elderly in All Saints Home, they couldn't have visitors. So what they did was that they raised some funds to help with the payment of subscription for all the mobile devices, so that these old people, they could communicate with their loved ones. And I actually have another good friend and classmate. On his own accord, he mobilized his business associates in Singapore and China, plus some of my classmates, to raise funds to buy masks, for All Saints Home. You remember there was a period where masks was in shortage. So I'm very thankful for all these acts of kindness from different people. Yeah, there was also another choir. They did an online recording. They sang something posted online, and then they also used the opportunity to raise funds for All Saints Home. So just now the three groups of people I mentioned, actually within one block, you actually have got many people inside. Okay, so let's say in my previous company, probably from that donation, actually we make connection with 100 people. That choir, from that connection, we actually should build relationships with maybe 70 or 80 people. So my encouragement to all the charity leaders here is that despite the challenges we're facing, we just have to make the best of the opportunity, because there are many things we can't change overnight. We can't change the economy, but there are certain things we can do ourselves. And building relationships and keeping in touch with our donors, this is something that we can do. Thank you, Jen.
And that kind of also puts down, how goes back to the whole relational part. How, because you've gone on a journey, people kind of are inspired by the work, not just the organization does, but the leaders within the organization. Yep. And can you imagine if every board member, if every subcommittee member, if every volunteer, if every staff of a nonprofit, SSA, social service agency, were to have one friend like Samuel's friend? Can you imagine the support network we could have mobilized? Unfortunately, we get very stuck with the methodologies. Oh, we need to do direct mail, we need to do online, we need to do corporate. We get very stuck with the methodologies without going back to the basics of who are our friends, who we can work with. And that's kind of a culture of knowing, of inclusivity. We would rather stand on the road with a can in our hands and ask a total stranger than to tell our story to the people who really care about us. And through them, they may not give, but through them, creating a network of people who will support. And that brings back to the sustainability point of the organization. With or without COVID, we need to ensure we're putting processes in place, and we're having that debate, and goes back to Peggy's point about the ethics. Now, if we are working for battered women, and we have an organization that actually in its advertising shows disrespect to women, would you take that kind of money, for example? Or the alcohol or the cigarette example, which was used. So those are all questions that leadership within organization need to think through and have clear kind of a culture, so that it doesn't matter whether it's a volunteer, a staff, or a board member who talk to others, you all have the same narrative. what you would do and what you would not do. What are the no-go areas? And of course, what are the regulatory restrictions that you need to be aware of? And that brings us to some of the questions. So panelists, all set, roll up your sleeves and we are ready to go with some of the questions. Now, I would like Samuel, first of all. There is a lot of questions on the, on the actual application of the 30%. What, what can we, how do we decipher? So first point I want to highlight is it's for the annual. So I know some of you have asked, for my direct mail, how do I keep it under 30%? Well, if you're doing direct mail that goes to 35% for whatever reason, I really want to know how you're doing it because you shouldn't be spending, but anyway, but even if you do, you need to do a major gift where there is really no major cost. So collectively in a year, you average out the 30%, yeah? So that you need to know. So I'm not going to take some of your questions as very specific. How do I keep my cost low for one particular? It's a strategic thing. If you have something that takes more, you find something that takes less so that you average it out. But to the question, Samuel, how does, as All Saints as an entity, how do you manage your 30%? Or how much, how do you do some of that?
Okay.
The fundraising efficiencies, basically.
Yeah, this fundraising efficiency is, is measured by, the numerator is the cost, the expenses connected with the fundraising, and the denominator is the income from the fundraising. And when we calculate this efficiency, we will disregard the sponsorship. There might be some corporate sponsorships, you may get T-shirts or some items that will be for some commercial value, right, for the sponsor. So all these we do not take into consideration. So now 30%, in my opinion, is quite a high percentage. So you will typically use that only when you are really maybe you have a concert, you have to hire some very top-notch artists who are not willing to do pro bono. Yeah, but even you fly them to Singapore, they will be on first class or business class at least, right? So so for All Saints Home, we do not use commercial fundraisers. So for us, we keep that ratio pretty low. And when we find that by doing that, we can ensure that the bulk of the donation actually goes into the beneficiaries.
All right, that's very good. Peggy, you want to, and Robson, I'll come to you after Peggy. Peggy, you want to take on some of the questions that you're seeing in the clinical functions.
Thank you, Usha. I've been reading through, sorry if I was staring intently at the screen, I was actually reading the questions. I would like to answer, there was a question from Alexandra who asked about the different types of errors made by charities. And there was another gentleman who asked about what are the top 3 breaches committed by charities. And here I'd like to invite you to go to the charities portal where there's actually a whole page dedicated to orders having been made by the Commissioner of Charities, because the Commissioner of Charities is empowered to make, and he does make restriction orders, suspension orders, or prohibition orders in respect of a charity for any breaches that they have done. So if you go to that, you look at, and it goes back some time, you'll be able to see and read firsthand what are the actual breaches that have been committed. The technical legal breaches are dealt with by the law, but the rest of it, like the way that you've infringed the should do's or things are not done in the right way, then you please look at the orders that have been made, because that I think would be more useful. Then Jean-Luc has asked whether or not there's any regulatory channel for charities to report any suspicious wrongdoings or anything that they're not comfortable about. And here I'll invite you to then, if you do know of anything like that, or you hear about anything like that, it's not about whistleblowing, it's about ensuring that this entire giving space that we have carefully cultivated in Singapore, that it is protected, and in order to ensure that that is kept pristine. Please, if you have any of such doubts, channel it to the CU, to the charities unit, and give them a call, and they will attend to it and look into it. Okay. There was also a question about third-party fundraisers. Third-party fundraisers and whether a permit is needed to fundraise for foreign charitable purposes. In the link that Pauline will put through later on, you will note that the legislation that we have is not just the Charities Act. There is also the Charities Fundraising Appeals for Local and Foreign Charitable Purposes Regulations 2012. So those are the subsidiary legislation made pursuant to the Charities Act. And if you look at that, you will see it provides for all of it. Because there are ifs and buts, the long and short of it is that permits are needed. Back to you, Usha.
Thank you, Peggy. And I have seen a few questions on foreign fundraising. How do we raise funds for organizations outside of Singapore, where it's not here? Robson, do you want to talk to that, and any other questions that you've seen that you want to field?
I think basically a lot of these questions, well, if you go to the regulations and the links that Pauline is going to put up, you could find it here. And I think just now there was a Margaret So who asked where are the regulations found. I just typed an answer and said that, well, Peggy has just answered the questions, namely the Charities Fundraising Appeals for Local and Foreign Charities Purposes Regulation 2012. I mean, there are so many questions, so maybe I leave it to you, Usha, to
Right.
tell me the questions that I think it would be.
I shall arrow you.
Arrow, whatever, yeah. And I'll answer it.
Perhaps, Usha, would it be?
Yes,
Sorry,
go
would
ahead,
it be useful, because I actually have it on my screen. I have the fundraising regulations on my screen. So
you want to just screen share? Yeah, might as well. We'll put the link for everybody, but please go ahead, Peggy. That's useful.
Because that's for immediate purposes. I think it would be useful. And bear with me. This is the Act itself. This is the Act. This is the Charities Act itself, where you will see. You recall earlier I spoke about the. If you look at Section 39B of the Charities Act itself, you will see the power of the Commissioner to issue those orders that I was speaking about. All right, that's 39B. And then if you look at 39A, you'll see the prohibition. So the Charities Act is actually the law, the applicable law. All right, and then corollary to this is these are the 2012 rules that we were speaking about. And in particular, if you go to Section 21, sorry if I'm making you giddy, if you look at 21, that specifically goes to, there we have it.
And while Pauline is kindly sharing the screen, we also have in the links the documents that will be useful to you.
Yeah.
And later I will ask Samuel for his input on some of it in terms of the actual application, yeah, of some of these laws.
So here it is. Fundraising for foreign charitable purposes. So that's the 2012 regulations.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And also, if I may add, because if you are an IPC, your money has to, so 80% of the monies have to stay in Singapore for Singapore purposes. So you want to make sure, even if you're doing a fundraising appeal, and you don't use your IPC account for that, because you do not give your donors a tax exempt for money that leaves town. So you want to make sure that your donor really knows if the donor is giving you for purposes of tax exemption, but the money needs to get to Indonesia or wherever else, yeah, that does not, that tax exemption does not apply to money that leaves town, yeah? So you want to make sure your accounts are kept proper, because that's a compliance requirement, yeah? So there is a conformance requirement which is related to all the regulation, and the performance requirement of taking care of your donor and understanding the donor's requirement. And the flip side of it is also educating the donor of the do's and don'ts based on the Singapore regulations, within which you will have to ensure you are doing the fundraising. So that's just to give you some idea. Robson, there was a question related to KYC, know your customer. And I'm thinking, especially now with the Anti-Terrorism, Anti-Money Laundering Act, how would a charity ensure that, you know, the KYC or the know your customer is being dealt with?
I mean, KYD for your donor. I think at the end of the day, the issue of money laundering comes about when someone tries to legalize something using the institution or the viaduct in order to ensure that at the end of the day, the monies go to the designated purpose, which is illegal. But if you are a charity and you have ensured that every cent that you have collected is properly accounted for and used exclusively for the stated purpose, the objective of your fundraising, then of course, that's what I'm talking about within Singapore. Then I think any you know, improper or ulterior motive, I think that to a large extent can be mitigated or even you know, muted.
Okay, thank you, Robson, but he did cover that point. Another question that was in the audience, Samuel, can you try and field that in terms of how do you ensure, in terms of gifts in kind, how do you manage reporting gifts in kind? You know, how do you value it under your 30%? How does that work?
Okay, the gift in kind, we will classify them as income, but we will have to have a valuation for that.
Yeah, and how do you usually value it?
Okay, I think that the gift in kind that for All Saints Home that we would value would be usually for food items like rice. You know, we do get this kind of donations. So, I think we probably will consider the cost of the rice item that we receive.
All right, okay.
Yes.
So that's kind of a valuation based on what you would have otherwise bought, and
Yes.
then you kind of say, okay, this is what it
That's
costs.
right. Yeah.
Okay, not some branded rice, right? But the regular you would have bought if you had bought it with unrestricted income that you have. Yeah. All right. Okay, there are some other questions.
Usha, may I answer one?
Yes,
I see
go
a
ahead.
question from Wong Ting Mei, and Ting Mei wants to know whether a freelance fundraiser who takes payment on a success basis, whether or not that person, what would be the capacity of that fundraiser. And I would refer you to the fundraising regulations 2012, and the definition. And I'm sorry to be looking away from the screen because I'm looking at my other screen. The definition of a commercial fundraiser is defined in those regulations in section 13(1) of those regulations. And this person who, so long as it's a person who takes, who for the word of the regulation is a person who for reward solicits money for the benefit of a charitable institution, would then be considered under the definition to be a commercial fundraiser. So Ting Mei, the answer to your question would be that person would be defined under the statute, under the law, as a commercial fundraiser.
Thank you, Peggy. And there
Sorry,
are
I went off
Robson.
Welcome back. Welcome back, Robson.
There are some other questions related to commercial fundraising or percentage-based fundraising, whatever you want to call it, third-party fundraising. Some of those, there is a and as staff, and Peggy and I were having that conversation, like you pay your staff, your fundraising staff, that's a salary. That is not a reward for the, based on a commission. But the moment, if you decide that your staff will get a commission, automatically this law comes into play, because then you are a commercial fundraiser. Same with any freelance, any consultant, whoever, where the performance is based on the monies being brought in, a percentage, that becomes commercial and the law kicks in. Yeah? So just make sure that you understand the difference between a fundraising a staff, a consultant who's paid for services versus a person who is paid on percentage raised. Yeah. So that's where there is a thing. One of the links that we've given there on commercial fundraising. All right.
Usha, would you allow me just to add a point?
Yes. Samuel, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, when it comes to fundraising, I know it's very convenient to just hire someone to raise funds, or to hire a top-notch person in your management team to raise funds. I feel that for fundraising, it is actually a collective effort of the entire organization, starting from the board to the senior management and to all the staff. Everyone must have this passion to want to bring on board people to support the organization. So you can't just depend on a fundraiser or a star, one of your staff who is a star in generating donation, because you can't depend on one or two people. It has to depend on the entire organization. Then the donation can be sustainable.
Well said. Culture of philanthropy within your organization before you can even step out the door and ask others to join in the process. Peggy, did you have something to add to that, or some other question you wanted to field?
Well, I was going to answer Richard Khalil's question. Richard wanted to know whether or not he can send an email to a donor who has made a donation through Giving, one of the online platforms, who has made a donation through giving.sg, to ask for permission to include him or her into our mailing list. And the answer is yes. Not only should you, you must. You must, because, and it's not only about protecting his dignity. I mean, aside from that, because there's the issue of PDPA to be considered. So you must protect, and that donor has the, you have to obtain that donor's consent in order, before you include that person onto your mailing list. So the issues of PDPA and protection of privacy would also be legal issues that we as charities would need to navigate, all right, for that protection. Thank you.
And like all laws, it's like the Uncle Jay that Peggy shared about. If the person gave for a campaign that supported something like that, I don't think he's going to get upset with you for sending out a smiling Uncle Jay to say, hey, this is one of the impact of your work. So don't get PDPA just because there's a law about it to say, oh, we cannot contact, because that's part of the whole journey that you're taking. Yes, you don't just send him another appeal asking for more money. That wouldn't be right. That he can then report you and blacklist you. But if you're reporting to him the reason and the impact of his contribution and inviting him to join the rest of the journey, who's going to stop? I mean, I've been in it for too long and nobody's ever stopped me from thanking them for the good work they've done for our services, through our services. Peggy, you want to add?
There is one more question that I will take, and I will answer this with, from the viewpoint of being on the Charities Council. Grace Pan. Grace has asked a very useful question, I think. What investments should we make for fundraising? Now, Grace, I don't know whether you're referring to the hard capital, but I would like to answer this by saying your investments should not just be in the hardware, i.e. do you have your super gizmos and your high-tech computers to make sure that you get all the online things done, but the investment, I think, before you even go into the hardware, should be in the hardware of the organization. So just as Samuel says, everybody, it should be a concerted effort. And therefore, the fundraising, your investment should be to think through and carefully consider after having known what is your organizational mission, then what is your fundraising mission and what is your fundraising goal? And then how do you go about plot out your plan as to how you will get there? And as you're doing this, the fundamental assumption must be that every member in your organization who's invested in that fundraising, and I use that word invested in purposefully, that they share the same culture that I was talking about, that it has already gone in top down. So that when you put in your hardware and your hardware, those are the investments that you put into fundraising, which will, I assure you, reap you the benefits in this culture of giving that we have carefully cultivated in Singapore.
Can I add on to what Peggy has said? I think because previously I sat on a charitable organization. It was in education. I think it's very important that you must have an investment committee. You must have an investment policy. You must take care of the bottom line. Then the top side will take care of itself. So it's very important that at the end of the day, when you have raised funds and for a stated purpose or for a charitable objective or a particular project, you don't want to basically have the funds disappear overnight because what you have invested is speculative. There are no safeguards, and you lose a substantial amount of funds that you have raised from the public. And then you can't account for the losses. And some of these things, at the end of the day, when you start having the accounting treatment applied mark to market and all that, you find that you have lost more than 50 or worse, even more of what you have raised from the public. So you must have a policy that errs on the side of being conservative, because at the end of the day, you are not a fund manager. You are not a professional fund manager, which basically people sign up for because they want higher returns and all this. In fact, the so-called returns, if for want of a better word, is nothing more than to make sure that you don't have idle funds sitting there while funds are needed only in phases. So and the challenge always is when you have people who sit or who come and volunteer and says, well, I have all these wonderful schemes and wonderful ideas. I can help you make more money and all that. That's where you have got to, take a back step and say, look here, yes, it sounds wonderful, but it's not my money. It's money from the public. So even if you are public listed companies, you don't want to, at the end of the day, lose a large part of the funds that you raise from your fundraising activities, and then you can't account for why suddenly you lose it. And audit and accounting principles are very scary, because when you get things can go,
All right.
And you are holding on to something that's not worth the paper that you are holding. So that's where I want to come in. Yeah.
Yes. And so there is investment both in investing in ensuring your fundraising ensures the sustainability of your entity and your mission. And then having raised it, the investment part, which Robson is talking about, the regulatory framework within which you ensure that your undesignated, unrestricted reserves that you have are being managed in a way that is not just idle, but at the same time, in a way, it's in keeping with the purposes of your organization and not, to take the risk of losing what you've done. So fundraising is of course, about ensuring you have the money to deliver the services, and over time ensuring sustainability. So another matrix I would like to ask you as board members and management to see is, what is your reserve ratio? Yeah, I'm not saying you need 5-10 years reserve. do you have at least 2 years reserve, one to bridge your operations and one a little more? You know, because as per the commissioner, you know, 2 years is what NCSS even recommends. How are we doing fundraising in a way that helps us raise unrestricted reserve in addition to actual day-to-day operations? So those are some questions when it comes to the investment in fundraising and the investment of what is, you know, the savings that you can manage to keep your organization sustainable. Sam, we are at the bottom of the hour. I would like, starting with Samuel, each of you to just give 1 or 2 points as your takeaways and your reflections from today. Can I start with Samuel, then Peggy and Robson?
Okay, my reflection is that now we are in a very difficult period, but we can still keep our spirits high, because when we are facing this crisis, there is always opportunity for us. And I already mentioned earlier on, we can take this opportunity to look at what our charity stands for, our vision, our mission, and also take this opportunity to connect with our donors and also volunteers and other stakeholders. And then hopefully when the situation improves further, then we can emerge stronger. Thank you.
Peggy, may I ask you to share with us your closing thoughts?
Osha, I think your mic is frozen, either that or the mic on my side. But I am, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Before we leave off, what I'd like to say is this. I'd like to remind everyone of what Commissioner has said yesterday. You recall he gave us the analogy of the trampoline. And he said, in these challenging times, you know, he has invited all of us to remain resilient and to bounce from this, And if you look at, and if you think about how it is like on a trampoline, you bounce, it goes down a bit, but it comes up. And every time you bounce, it goes higher and higher. And this, I invite all of you to look and to take to heart. It's the way that we in this charity sector should look at it. That within these challenging times, as Samuel has said, when we do take the effort to bounce, when we do move and do that, we will actually reach higher. So do tell everyone and work at it. That's all. It was really good to be.
Thank you, Peggy. And Robson, I think Robson froze. Robson, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear? All right. No, I think using the trampoline example, as you bounce up, you must make sure the netting is strong enough to take your weight each time you come down, and you don't crash. I think my take at the end of this workshop is you must have very robust and adequate internal controls, risk management, because then it enables you to discharge a duty of due diligence and accountability. So there must not be a situation where people say, look, there's a systemic failure, there's management override. All these beautiful rules they've put in is just for show. You know, and there's someone or two per person basically running and dictating how it works, and that person's word is the law of the land. So you have to make sure it's institutionalized. There's a system, there's internal controls, checks and balances, can withstand scrutiny and audit. Then whether you go down or you go up, at the end of the day, you are resilient, you are sustainable, and you are scalable. Because when people trust you, people have confidence in you, then you don't worry very much that you have a down period, because at the end of the day, you are institutionalized in the hearts and minds and souls of all your donors.
Hearts, minds, and souls. So that's so true about fundraising and about good fundraiser. You know, you get to the head, you know, figures of facts and figures, tell. Stories, sell. And that's, you know, and whether you're a commercial person or a charity person, it's your stories that help you with your fundraising. And we've got such beautiful stories to tell, such impactful, inspiring stories to tell. Not just of our beneficiaries, of ourselves. Why are we in this sector? So I really hope this hour and a half that we've spent together has inspired you, because fundraising without inspiration No use really. And then of course you have the legal and the ethical safety nets and questions to consider. And thank you so much to our very solid panel that we have. Thank you, Robson, Peggy, as well as Samuel, for fielding the questions. And there are some questions that we may have left out because it's kind of a repetition of some of the pointers that we've, but Pauline and team from CS will surely consolidate some of that. And as she mentioned, will ensure that we will be sharing more resources with you. And my thought about this and the questions that I've been hearing, there's so much capability efforts being put in, this conference being one of it. There are stuff for the boards to understand fundraising better. There's stuff for the management to understand fundraising better. Do utilize, and more of all of that is VCF funded. So make sure you are building your capabilities so that you just go and do an inspirational fundraising while meeting all the ethical and compliance requirements and the legal requirements. So I wish you all the best as we make sure we ride through this season of COVID and come the other end stronger and better capable of serving our communities for which we are doing the fundraising in the first place.